In October 1974, $2 billion vanished from the American banking system in a single weekend. The man behind it was already being hunted by the FBI, the Vatican Bank, and the Italian government, and he had been sitting in the chairman's seat the whole time. Franklin National Bank wasn't a small institution. By 1974, it was the 20th largest bank in the United States, with branches across Long Island and New York, billions in assets, and a reputation built over 3 decades of careful lending to suburban families and small businesses. It was the kind of bank where people kept their savings for a lifetime, the kind of bank no one worried about. That changed in 1972, when a Sicilian financier named Michele Sindona bought a controlling stake. Sindona wasn't an ordinary banker. He had built a financial empire that stretched from Milan to Manhattan, from Rome to the Bahamas. He was the personal financial advisor to the Vatican. Italian prime ministers took his calls. He was called the Shark, Il Squalo, by associates who meant it as a compliment. When Sindona walked into Franklin National, he didn't come to stabilize it. He came to use it. The mechanism was foreign exchange trading. In the early 1970s, the Bretton Woods system, the post-war framework that had fixed global currency rates, was collapsing. Nixon had taken the dollar off the gold standard in 1971. Currencies were now floating, rising and falling against each other every hour of every trading day. For banks with the right positions, this was a money machine. For banks with the wrong ones, it was a furnace. Franklin's traders, operating under pressure from Sindona's circle, took enormous speculative positions in foreign currencies. They were betting on the direction of the dollar against the German mark, the Swiss franc, the British pound. For a brief period in 1972 and into 1973, some of those bets paid off. But the positions kept growing, far beyond what any prudent institution would hold. And when the markets moved against them, the losses were catastrophic. Here is where it gets worse. Instead of reporting those losses, bank officers allegedly began falsifying entries in the books. Losing positions were recorded as profitable ones. Losses that should have appeared on the balance sheet were hidden, moved, obscured. The gap between what the bank actually held and what it told regulators it held grew wider by the month. By early 1974, that hidden gap was measured not in thousands, not in millions, but in hundreds of millions of dollars. If you had your savings at Franklin National in the spring of 1974, you had no idea any of this was happening. The bank looked healthy from the outside. But on May 10, 1974, Franklin disclosed something its investors were not expecting. It was suspending its dividend. That single announcement sent the stock into freefall. The financial press started asking questions. Regulators started looking harder. And what they found, slowly and then all at once, was the full scope of the disaster. The Federal Reserve stepped in. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation began monitoring the situation on a daily basis. Franklin tried to find a buyer, a white knight who would absorb the institution and protect depositors. Month after month, the search went nowhere. Behind the scenes, the foreign exchange losses kept mounting, even as the bank tried to unwind its positions in a market that had moved decisively against it. The comptroller of the currency later estimated that the foreign exchange losses alone exceeded $200 million. But the total picture, including the damage to the loan portfolio and the erosion of confidence, made the institution unsalvageable. On October 8, 1974, federal regulators declared Franklin National Bank insolvent. It was the largest bank failure in American history up to that point. Deposits of nearly $2 billion were at stake. The FDIC arranged an emergency takeover by European American Bank, ensuring that retail depositors didn't lose their savings. But the collapse sent shock waves through the global financial system, at a moment when the world was already reeling from the oil crisis and rampant inflation. Foreign banks that had lent money to Franklin were left holding losses. Confidence in the entire American banking system took a measurable hit. Michele Sindona didn't stay in New York. He fled to Italy in 1974, attempting to use his connections, political, ecclesiastical, and allegedly criminal, to avoid extradition. His Italian banking empire was unraveling simultaneously. Banks he controlled in Milan were failing. The Italian government was investigating. There were allegations, deeply serious ones, connecting Sindona to the Sicilian Mafia, to the P2 Masonic Lodge, a shadowy organization later found to include senior military officers, judges, and politicians, and to a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of Italian public life. An American grand jury indicted Sindona in 1974. For years, he evaded justice through legal maneuvers and political interference. In 1979, he allegedly staged his own kidnapping in an attempt to pressure Italian authorities into dropping investigations against him. It didn't work. He was extradited to the United States and tried in federal court in New York. In 1980, a jury convicted him on 65 counts: fraud, conspiracy, perjury, and misappropriation of bank funds. He was sentenced to 25 years in a federal prison. He was eventually returned to Italy to face charges there. In 1986, 2 days after an Italian court sentenced him to life imprisonment for ordering the murder of a lawyer investigating his affairs, Michele Sindona drank a cup of coffee in his prison cell. The coffee was laced with cyanide. He died hours later. Italian authorities ruled it a suicide. Whether Sindona took his own life or was silenced by someone who feared what he might say remains one of the great unanswered questions of post-war European financial crime. The wreckage he left behind was enormous and permanent. The Franklin national collapse accelerated regulatory reform of American banking. It exposed how inadequately supervised foreign exchange operations were, how easily falsified entries could survive routine audits, and how a single well-connected operator could hollow out a major institution while regulators watched. The FDIC playbook for handling large bank failures was rewritten in the wake of Franklin. The reforms it triggered would shape American banking regulation for decades. The Vatican, for its part, quietly paid out more than $200 million in the early 1980s as part of a settlement connected to the collapse of a related Italian bank. An acknowledgement, without admission of wrongdoing, that the institutions Sindona had woven together had caused genuine harm to genuine people. Here is the lesson that every one of these autopsies eventually arrives at. The $2 billion didn't disappear because of one rogue trade or one unlucky quarter. It disappeared because the people responsible for watching the numbers chose, repeatedly, not to see them. False entries require someone to write them. Hidden losses require someone to hide them. And the longer the fiction holds, the more catastrophic the moment when it doesn't. Money doesn't die in a single blow. It bleeds out slowly, behind closed doors, in entries that no one in authority wanted to read. By the time the weekend of October 8, 1974 arrived, Franklin National had been dead for months. The paperwork just took that long to catch up.